For the last 3 years, between recording segments of the D6 generation, Russ, Craig, and Rafe have had various conversations that have spanned the interests of gamerdom worldwide. This is one of those conversations.
D6G, The Lost Chapters.
That's right, it's the Lost Chapter about Neil Fawcett. A wrestling thing. Well, not only do we have conversations, but we also listen to what our listeners have to say, which is sort of like, I don't know, that's like existential. I don't know about anything about that.
It's informed content.
Exactly.
You give back to us, and we give back to you.
Indeed. And one of the things, and we know that the interview with Neil had some really bad audio. It wasn't the worst audio we've ever had.
No.
It was some bad audio. Well, I just spent 2 hours listening to it slowly and making a transcript that we're actually going to work from, and we're going to sort of review. We're not going to go through word for word or as Russ says, verbatim.
Right.
Which you can take up to 6 hours before intercourse.
I didn't write that.
Right. And we can we're just going to we're going to give you the information that Neil gave us in the interview, and we're going to actually talk a little bit more about it than we were able to talk during the show.
Right.
So without further ado, of course, we started with "Are you now or have you ever been a gamer?" And this was the first time anybody has ever responded in a way that intimidated me.
Yes, it was, right?
Rafe, do you remember how much money he said his miniature collection was probably worth?
Oh, God. I don't remember the money part of it, but I remember the just tons and tons and tons of figures, and especially once he told us the scale.
Yeah, he said...
What was the money?
He said about £500,000.
Yeah.
And I thought, surely he's exaggerating.
No.
And then he went on to, it's got 200,000 figures in the collection, 500,000 vehicles.
Right.
It's insured.
And then he sent us pictures.
He sent us pictures.
He sent us pictures, so we saw it. And here's the thing. I said, are they all painted? Because I was thinking, of course,
this is why they're worth about 0.5
Not only are they all, he said he's lazy, so he hires them all out to be painted. So they're all painted, and he paid for them all to be painted. Now,
right, they're all professionally painted.
This isn't money he made with Spartan. Neil obviously had some good paying gigs prior to Spartan, as we'll go into in a minute.
In fact, this was almost all prior to Spartan.
Right. So that was pretty. So he not only is he a gamer, he's a pretty hardcore gamer who loves to collect models. Now, he's not a hobbyist. Clearly, he has other people paint his stuff, but he loves to collect and.
Yeah, that includes 6mm figures. He has a 28,000 model army of Alexander the Great.
Right. That's what I remember.
With a shield wall that stretched 6 feet wide and 11 figures deep. It was pretty crazy.
Holy mackerel!
Yeah. So, but speaking of him before Spartan. We asked him what was his origin story, and he was in the tech industry for a while. He knows Seattle well. Explain that to me, Russ. What does that mean when you know Seattle well?
He was hinting that he may have worked with Microsoft because Seattle is the base
what I thought.
Locations for Microsoft. Sure. So, but he he didn't name any company names. He said, "Well, but I know Seattle well," so he obviously had some relationships there with Microsoft.
So basically, he did very well for himself, working in the tech industry to the point where he actually wrote several technology books.
Yeah.
He worked as a war correspondent. He was, I guess, the backroom guy who did a lot of technical things on how the weapon systems worked, and then briefing the other journalists on how to survive in the field. And eventually, he did so well that he retired.
Right.
And he went home to spend some time with his kids. And then, what usually happens when a guy retires early happened, and his wife got sick of him and kicked him out of the house and said, "Go start something new."
Right.
And that's how he started Spartan Games. Now, probably my favorite anecdote of the entire interview was he was talking about, and again, this gives you kind of an insight into the Fawcett home. His wife is a busy woman, so she has a hairdresser comes to the house. Mm-hmm. So one day, his wife decided that his hair was looking a little unkempt also. So the hairdresser who comes to the house for her, she paid her to cut Neil's hair as well. And I'm sure Neil did it with good grace, and he sat down and he had just had one of his a box of painted models show up. And he was opening it while the woman was getting ready, and she looked at it and was like, "Aren't you a little too old to be playing with toy soldiers?" And he said, "Yeah, maybe, but how much do you think the box is worth?" And she said, "About 40 or 50 pounds." And he said, "This box is worth 1,000 pounds. You'd have to cut a lot of hair for that, wouldn't you?"
Right.
Mean.
Wow.
But you can tell the woman kind of rubbed him the wrong way.
Yeah.
Because apparently they were done by a painter who was unfortunately passed away over the past couple years, but Neil really felt close to him, and he never even played with these. They were so beautiful.
I have to say, it was too bad that the audio was so garbled, because when I was listening to it, and I can hear it better on the podcast than I could live. Still, his enthusiasm for both being on the show, he had a cough, it was up late, and yet I could still hear the enthusiasm that he has.
Not only
for
that,
our hobby,
he's also, absolutely.
Yeah.
He's also
not
got
just his little venture, but being part of us as a hobby gamer, a miniature gamer. You
absolutely get that feeling.
I mean, that made me just stay on the line just to listen to that, the enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Anything else?
No, I think I'm done. But when you start talking, I'll probably think of something new.
You probably will. I thought, he has an awesome sense of humor too, and I hope that came across, because that's not really going to come across here. I tried to include a couple of things so you'd know that he was making fun of himself, but he has a really fun sense of humor also.
Right.
So we asked him, how did the whole Spartan Games thing start? The wife kicks you out, and so what happens? So he starts once again with another little thing where he met a young boy on the internet.
Yeah, right.
Nobody.
No, I got it.
Okay. Who was a sculptor, and Neil at this point had decided what he really wanted was a couple fantasy fleets for himself. So the guy sculpted him what would eventually become the dwarves and the dragon lords of Uncharted Seas. And he had these ships, and they sat on a shelf for 2.5 years. And his friends kept telling him, you need to do something with those models. They're beautiful. You've got to do something. So in the process of finding someone to paint the ships, he ended up finding a guy, and his name escapes me, which I feel really bad about. But it's the guy who basically worked with Neil on all the rules mechanics ultimately, because they got to know each other, and they liked each other, so they ended up working together on a rules set, which ultimately became Uncharted Seas.
Dun, dun.
And what's that?
That was just background music. Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, dun 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 dun.
I do like that part of it. Again, as an entrepreneur, how many times have anybody thought of a great idea, and your friend's like, "You got to do something with that. You got to do something with that," and you're like, "Yeah, whatever."
Right,
and
right.
So it's it was nice to know Neil's the same as us. He's like, "Yeah, they're cool. Well, what am I going to do with them? They're mine." But he thought of what to do with them.
And he's a good example of when you have those ideas and you kick them around with your friends, it can work.
Right.
All you need is the kind of income that can collect 500,000 pounds worth of miniatures.
Apparently, that's it. Well, I think what came across to me was Neil, his background in business, and in particular in tech. I think he's obviously led a lot of successful projects. He was also, by the way, a reporter, right?
Right. Yeah.
So which means he's an excellent communicator. He's a good facilitator. He's a good organizer.
Right.
He's obviously technically minded and project centric, and you need to have those kind of abilities to run a business. So
you know what?
You have sort of the perfect storm of all the abilities.
Right.
I didn't think of that until you just said that, but I think a reporter, a journalist, is more than a good communicator, because you could argue, that's a bad thing, but you could argue a politician might be a good communicator, but a journalist needs to know how to listen, a good one.
Right. Well,
because isn't that what he's known for? Is listening to his fan base.
Yeah, he's doing a good job.
Talked about that later in the interview.
He does, yeah.
Yeah. So I thought it was interesting because he's talking basically about right from the beginning, the goal of the company was to make, or the goal of his friend and himself was to make a game that was kind of fun, kind of quirky, and it wasn't super crunchy and super competitive. It was a beer and pretzels, he said. He kind of shied away from beer and pretzels, but he said it was basically that, where you can have a fun, simplified game, have some fun, not get too stressed, and put it away and not feel all upset about it. Because himself, he primarily enjoys modeling and having the models and using the models and the social aspect, and so that from the very beginning was what Spartan Games was going to be all about. And it was going to be like a little fun thing that he did on the side because, you know, he didn't need to make any money or anything, but their wild success overnight caught everybody by surprise. That another thing that I thought was awesome was the whole thing started on his dining room table and in his garage, and in 3 weeks they had to rent business space for it. It was so successful because they had anticipated they were going to, you know, release some models and maybe then they'll do a rule book, but things were so impressive that instead of selling hundreds of models right out of the gate, they sold thousands and thousands, and they had to immediately start playing catch up.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why they started to see the rocky start we saw, because they were expecting a slow growth, and they suddenly had a waterfall.
Right, exactly, and that's why we saw. Also, another thing that we noticed where they came, the Uncharted Seas, the original book, didn't have a lot of advanced rules in it.
Right,
and it was kind of like, oh, and then the advanced rules started coming out in dribs and drabs on the internet, and we were like, oh, we don't really like that. Like, where's all this stuff coming from? Well, you learn in the interview that he actually had all that stuff already set up. Right. And it was all ready to go in the book, but somebody decided, Neil or someone, Neil had the ultimate say, but they decided not to put the advanced rules into Uncharted Seas because they didn't want to make it look overly complicated.
Right.
And that's his one big regret, he says, in the initial launch of Uncharted Seas was underselling it. Like he was almost apologetic right out of the bat, and he didn't put everything he had into it.
Right.
So they had to dribs and drabs it later, which left the rest of us like, where's all this stuff coming from? And, you know, how come I can't have the rules to the models I can get? And because exactly what Russ said, it was like this success story that had actually, you know, caught them all by surprise.
Which can actually, I'm excited that it didn't kill the business, because it's another rare thing with businesses, you know, is success can kill it just as easily as failure. Yeah,
that's a mark of, again, I think, is his experience kicking in there. You know, he's because he comes from someone with experience in another industry that was sort of semi-retired and not maybe a young entrepreneur just starting up his first business. He had the wherewithal to identify what the challenges were quick enough to react. I think that's another sign of experience, right? Because that's a very fast growth can be, as you said, Rafe, just as deadly to a business as no growth. Right. Because you can totally make a misstep, overextend in one direction or the other, and be dead.
Yeah, you know? Absolutely. So then he was going on. He was talking about what they set out to do when they first did the Uncharted Seas and why it was so successful. And again, he goes back to the fact that the whole point is to have fun. And that's why the system is relatively simple. Like we keep going back to, it's not hard to grasp. It's not counterintuitive. And they knew that they had good models right off the bat, but they knew that there were a lot of things that they could improve on the models. And as one example, those early models were all sculpted by hand, which makes it very difficult for them to, you know, make all make the pieces all look identical from one ship type to the next. Whereas now that they're doing it all with CAD, you can actually more easily make, you know, scale up or scale down all the different designs. And he said the older models that were made by hand, they're going to start to be remade because the Dragon Lords have to be remade. Something happened to a bunch of the Masters. They were accidentally destroyed. So they're actually, this is the first new piece of information he gave us, like exciting up-and-coming information. The Dragon Lords are going to be the first ones to get this new treatment where they're going to start focusing their new sculpting abilities on the old range, and they're going to roll out some new ideas with the older fleets, and that'll start with the Dragon Lords, mainly because something happened and those Masters were destroyed.
This is part of where, again, his self-effacing humor was funny, though, because we asked him, you know, what did he think made Spartan such a unique, sudden success, and he said, you know, well, I'd like to say it's due to my huge intellect and massive business acumen.
Right.
Or go ahead.
Yeah, but he admitted, he's like, you know, I really have no idea. He thought, you know, maybe it's because the models were cool and the game was fun, but I wanted to ask you guys, what do you think made it such a huge success?
I think the absence of like I think it has a lot to do with Man of War.
I do too.
Because I think there were a lot of fans that felt abandoned by GW.
What's Man of War again? I've heard the name, but I don't.
It's the GW Fantasy Naval Combat game.
Right.
So is that a precursor to Battle. What's the space
No,
one they
it's
had?
not a precursor to
Gothic?
anything.
No,
it's
it was there. Well, I mean, unless you define Battlefield Gothic as a naval combat game,
Yeah, that's what I meant.
but they have
but
nothing in
Right.
common.
They have nothing in common except that they're both from GW and one's in
Right.
space and one's in water.
Right.
But
Okay.
so I guess you could argue it's the Warhammer Fantasy Battle version of Battlefield Gothic, but it way predates it by a decade.
Right, or more.
Yeah. So Man of War was. It was a very beloved, it's like Blood Bowl kind of thing, or Epic. It's a very, very, and I still have my fleet. Huge fan of the game.
Yeah.
It had its issues, but it was a fun naval combat game. And there's been really no great naval combat games at all.
Especially fantasy.
Right, fantasy. And the sci-fi ones have been hit or miss, right? There's been some that have been good. We like Babylon 5, Call to Arms, but Mongoose sort of had trouble with it. And I think
it died.
You might be able to look at Mongoose as an example of a company who had, because I think initially Babylon 5 was doing pretty well.
I think it was.
I think then they tried other projects with that many instead of reinvesting in that game.
Yeah,
I don't know.
exactly.
I don't know exactly what happened there, but if you look at that,
they went with the modern combat game there.
Right, they put all their money. It's right. They put all their money and profits from their other games into that modern combat game.
In the pre-painted, and they got screwed with the pre-painted,
right.
and
so they instead of. Now, what's interesting to see, you look at Spartan, what happened, and this is sort of an aside, but I think it's an interesting one. Remember when, after Uncharted Seas came out, they were talking about this miniature skirmish game and other things, and then all of a sudden they changed gears and then reinvested in Uncharted Seas more, and then Firestorm Armada came out, which is another naval combat game, which fills the whole of Babylon 5 and Battlefield Gothic. And now Dystopian Wars is out, which is another naval combat game, but it's a different theme, and it's got land units, but still it's naval combat. I think they're realizing, I think they figured out there's a niche here, but also I think there's things they've always wanted to do, and they realize there's a fan base for it. You know what I mean? Like there's
he mentioned that skirmish game too, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, that's still coming, but they didn't. But they also saw where the bread was buttered and kind of went in that way. I think.
All right. Well, there's a couple things that kind of happened in there that I'm interested in. So. You guys started to allude, you were starting to say something, well, that was something that Spartan Games didn't do that Babylon 5 did, and then you kind of went off of this thing. So Babylon 5, you would consider that game successful, but Mongoose Publishing kind of bungled and ruined it because they went in some different direction?
Well, they ruined their company. I mean, they ended up going from a miniatures company to a publishing company.
Oh, okay.
Because they did exactly what Russ said. The danger is when you have a wildly successful game is that you overextend in one direction or the other, that you don't deal well with that success, that you don't build on your strengths.
And that's what Mongoose
Spartan did. No, that Spartan built on its strengths. Mongoose didn't. It took its money and went in a direction that I don't think has ever been proven as lucrative on the major mass market, which would be modern combat.
Gotcha.
I think modern combat is very, very hit or miss. Okay. You know what I mean? Because it's so... I mean, their version was near future. It wasn't necessarily
sci-fi, right?
No, it wasn't necessarily like right now, but it was right now enough because the main enemies were, Middle Eastern militia guys without uniforms and very, very, very contemporary looking U.S. Marines, British Marines, and then Chinese. So it was very...
Yeah, we could do a whole show on what Mongoose did wrong in that game.
Right, but the key is that Spartan avoided that and did well.
But they picked a beloved area of miniature combat, it sounds like, although niche, which is the naval combat because Man of War was liked.
Well, I don't know that it was a beloved niche. What I think is there was a fan base already out there, and it was ready and ripe to be picked, and nobody had tapped into it. And Spartan, with awesome models and really strong rules right out of the gate, tapped into that immediately. That doesn't say that all of these guys that are playing Uncharted Seas were huge fans of Man of War. I think what happened was that probably is what started the ball rolling. Gave it more momentum than it would have had.
I think the other thing too is I think model quality is a huge thing here.
Huge, yeah.
I think miniature gamers, we have a long history of forgiving rule sets that we don't care for that much or that we have holes in for the model quality and the fluff and theme.
Yeah,
and I think I'll be the first to say I think Games Works is one of those examples where the rules are debatably good, but the models are undeniably awesome, and the theme is undeniably awesome. And I think you have a situation here with Uncharted Seas where some of the early rules may have changed a bit and been a little fluid because of some rethinks, but the models have consistently been amazing at each iteration, and they were rapid iterations. Only added more awesomeness, so you couldn't walk away from it. Like the next, the battleships came out right afterwards, and then you had the flyers start coming out, and then there was little flying dragons. And now they got the airships, and I think that's what gets a gamer's soul into a game. I think hobby gamers are all about the models. As long as your rules don't suck, if your models are awesome, and literally Spartan went from within a year from really cool naval models to some of the best we've ever seen by anybody.
Yeah. Well, I think the success is on when I watch Dystopian Wars, coming up from a Flames of War fan, I'm like, here's a game that's blending planes and aircraft and naval combat, and not even the land units yet. But I automatically felt like it was a kind of futuristic version of, or past/futuristic version of Flames of War. And you're right, Russ, but there's one thing I think that they tapped into to other people. So, you got to like the models. But then I'm thinking of all the historical guys. Yeah, they love their models drawn by the Perry brothers, but then they're all fighting over the 12 different Civil War rule sets to use.
Right.
Here's the secret. One book published by the same company and easily obtainable distribution. It wasn't just some model maker in some basement somewhere.
Yeah,
that's what I think the
complete
success
package is key. And again, getting to the cards, the starter packs with the cards and the reference cards in there, all that stuff together, they definitely looked at a package.
Oh, yeah.
thing.
It doesn't come down to just...
and another thing a lot of companies make a mistake of early on is they come to the table with at least 4 fleets ready to go.
Yep.
Right.
That is, in my opinion, that's the magic number. War Machine started with 4. Uncharted starts with 4. You have to start with 4.
Yeah.
4
Battlefield
gamers
has more than 4, I think, but
yeah, they do. But
they've started with 5.
But gamers feel like if there's less than 4, they'll always say, "Where's the variety?"
I agree.
That was the death knell to Starship Troopers.
And I think another huge part of their success was actually Neil's technical background.
Yes,
because he was fascinated right off the bat with, as soon as he got this idea in his head that he was going to do this, with the prototyping and the CAD abilities and the rapid way they could turn things around. And so he took his tech background and his just interest in his affinity for tech, and he put it into the company.
Right.
As soon as and that's what they did with that money, rather than go play other 18 different ways.
Right.
And so what you had was this company that just started, like it saw it right off the bat, like he said, it's a lot about it's got a lot to do with the models. So we want good models. So that's where a lot of the their research went in, and he went and hired professional model makers from the film industry, and he found the best resin supplier so that they could work with him, and all this worked together to to this point where he actually said the French battleship, instead of weeks and weeks of sculpting, was done in 3 days on a computer.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he said, we were fascinated by that, obviously, as everyone should be. And Russ was fascinated and said, how long does it take from sitting down at the computer to having a resin model in your hands? He said, if everything goes well, 5 days.
Yeah, that is incredible.
That's ridiculous.
And I think that's what we saw too in that little lull after Uncharted Seas was they were. He realized that he was going to have to build a foundation that could crank this stuff out.
Yep.
And he made the connections. He talked about how some of the stuff's farmed out. He works with other companies. He's got other partners involved, and so it's unclear on exactly how many folks are at Spartan versus how many folks are other places. But basically, he built his network in place so that he could crank this stuff out in bursts, right?
Yeah.
And bring on the resources he needed for the game launch, but then have the facilities in place to support it as he goes. And you can really see if you look at how the launch for Uncharted went versus the launch for Firestorm versus the launch for Dystopian.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's
really going to be fascinating to see if he can hit his next milestones on ground units and the next thing coming. But it sounds like from all these talking about coming out next year, they are just able to really push stuff out the door when they need to,
right.
and still look beautiful.
Craig just said something that made me realize something too, which is, it sounds like he's embracing technology. I mean, I kind of remember, hearing that in my legal profession, where in the old days we had typewriters, and so we needed 5 paralegals to type a 12-page, contract, and then now what do you need? One lawyer with a computer because of the word processing, and it sounds like that's exactly what Neil did. I mean, the three of us are so old in miniature gaming. We're such old farts that we can remember learning how much it cost, GW to make one Space Marine mold, back in the tool and die days, and there's like 3 guys in all of England that had to make that. Neil can reach out and say, all right, I need CAD designers. Boom.
Right.
Done.
Oh, and another thing that fits right in with what you're saying, where a certain people of a certain age are unlikely to be able to really leverage the internet, for instance. And that's another thing that Spartan has really done, which probably, again, goes back to his tech background. But he actually attributes that to his journalistic background, because he said as a journalist, he always wanted to know what his readers thought and what they were looking for, what they liked and what they didn't like. And so he's bringing that into this new arena of effort. And of course, obviously, wargamers are a very vocal crowd, and they'll give you their opinion whether you want it or not. And so he's got basically, you've got it. They're gonna give it to you. You might as well put it in a constructive format, right? And he would rather people know when that company makes a mistake, they try to fix it, rather than when that company made a mistake, they justified it by saying, well, you know what, that's the way orcs work. And that's the example is that the orcs in the initial release of Uncharted Seas, and I never saw it because, Russ, you only used your orcs a couple times, and they were kind of tough, but I didn't think they were super cheesy.
Well, they flipped that rule though very quickly after, and I just stopped using them because I wanted to wait till they settled them down. And then people started calling them cheesy, and I was like, I don't like playing with cheesy stuff, so I want to go back to them now and try them out now that everything's all leveled out.
Right, exactly. So they right off the bat they set up an example of how they would deal with what was perceived as a big problem. And now my issue had been like, oh, is this rules making by committee? And I think what he's actually said, and he didn't say it in the interview. He said it talking to us alone before the interview, but it wasn't anything that I think we can't say. He said it wasn't rules by committee. It was they took everything in and they looked at it all, but it was very much them at the company putting together what they thought was the best response to what the perceived weakness was. And they took everybody's thoughts into account, but it was very much their response.
I like that answer. Because that was one of the things that I charged them with in the beginning. Hearing you guys talk about it, I'm like, oh, God. Right. Easy for me to sit in the sidelines, right? I mean, they always say it's easier to criticize than it is to create. Here's me saying, oh, my God, rules by committee, you can't have that. And he had to, he was like, no, it wasn't that. We were gathering the information and then using that to make our decision. I'm like,
well, I think you can tell now that that's what they were doing.
Smart.
Right. We were just nervous about it, but I think it looked great. I mean, it came out great in the end, and I think, again, it goes back to his experience and knowing what to take from your people and what to let go.
It's very interesting to look at it now in retrospect to where, I mean, we were stuck in the weeds then as fans. We didn't know what was going on. And now that we see behind the scenes, you can see like they were scrambling to deal with the success of the game. They were scrambling to deal with all of these other goals that they had. They were upgrading all of their tech base. They were like actually buying office space or renting office space that they didn't even have. And so it's a very interesting background story. Right. But then that also brought me into my next question again with tech and material. Why do they use resin? I was very curious about like what the whole point of resin was over metal. I don't think. I mean, nowadays plastic might be a possible choice for a company that's up and coming, but back then it was still. This was actually Didn't we say plastic was like the up and coming at like small boutique shops were going to be able to use it like last year?
Well, more people are making plastics. I remember we said that, but I think also in the interview there was some little blurb he mentioned about plastic's sort of the dream because you spend lots of money, you make the mold months, and then you just go to sleep and at night it presses them out. Because plastic you can run around the clock.
You're right,
but I think it's still a lot of money for the quantity you need, and I also think the resin, he didn't tell us the exact process they use, but I think what's going on here is a lot of the new. I think he sort of hinted at it, the 3D. He said 3D CAD. So the 3D printing, right? Like people who play WoW might be familiar with figure prints, right? Which is the ability to
figure prints.
Print the 3D statue of your character from WoW, and it's all done digitally instantly on this little 3D printer that they have for mock. It's called fast prototyping in
right, and that's what they use.
So they're using that, and then they're just casting that and taking a resin mold of it, and I'm guessing that they've gotten really, really good resin technologies to the point where, well, does it make sense really to do the plastic route because we can do the resin molds? We got to make new ones, but they're so often,
Right.
but they're so cheap and they're so fast for us to prototype as compared to what it costs and the turnaround time to create, these super long lived metal or steel or whatever they are.
Yeah.
I think
what he said was, well, you look at metal as an option, and it's really good for high volume, but it doesn't take detail quite as well.
Right.
So the pieces where your Britannian battleship has 4 turrets on it.
Right.
So you want it to be able to point in different directions and give yourself a little more like design choices. So they make them out of metal. And he said they so much metal goes through the shop that, for instance, the Britannian turrets come in boxes of 36 kilos.
Right.
Of just Britannian turrets. And that's for packaging options, so they can split them all up as they want to. But the key, I think, is what he said with resin. When you've got really good resin and they have a great supplier that helps them with the recipes and everything, is that you can get down to 0.001 micron detail level, which I think is really big. I don't know. Sounds
small.
very impressive.
Right. So, and that's I don't know that, and I assume plastic offers that level of detail, but I don't know for sure.
Right. Well, I don't know. I mean, if you think about the really good GW kits,
it's pretty detailed. I mean,
it's pretty detailed. But then think about those stairs in the FSA.
I know, right? That's
aircraft
what I'm trying to think. It's a close race for me. If I think of the best plastics, in fact, I think the only place I've seen detail at this level is on some of the Forge World resins.
Right. Yeah.
Like if you think of the Forge World ships they made for that flight game they did for 40K, and for the sci-fi Tau ships for Battlefield Gothic and stuff, that's got close to, if not the same level as some of the Spartan stuff.
Right.
But that's resin. I think when you go to I don't know that. I mean, plastic might, but it's really close. It's really close.
Yeah. And basically what he said was, and another negative of resin is that you work through the molds, and eventually the molds get old and you can't use them anymore. And their molds actually, they stop using them. They have to throw them away after 8 days or 14 days, he said.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
really
Because
short amount of time.
They're running all those molds 8 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Right.
And just to give people an idea of where that's going, in 2011, he said they were going to be casting from 12 to 14 hours a day. They were going to have to add another shift. And that's why the molds need to be replaced so often. But he also said, which is very interesting, that for the past 6 months, Spartan has been looking at plastic.
Yes.
And they will be using it in the future, but right now they're enjoying the resin. And he said that the plastic would probably be for much larger pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So
I know that's kind of exciting.
There's all kinds of hints of cool, like in the fog of the future, emerging these amazing. Like, is it going to be big dystopian wars things? Is it going to be big Firestorm Armada things? I mean, there's all kinds of.
And if you listen later in the interview, he's going all over the place with scale. I mean, one minute he's talking about huge things, next minute he's talking about very, very tiny versions of things that are currently huge. It's which probably means even huger things next to those. So it's really exciting to see how they play with the different sizes of things.
Right. And then speaking of, we're going to go back now a little bit to the skirmish rules that Russ alluded to earlier, because we asked, every one of your games has the same basic system with the exploding D6s and the crit rating and the damage rating. We asked where that came from. And it actually, the first game was the Death or Glory, the Heroes of Myth and Legend is the game, and Death or Glory is the system. And that they came up with that before they applied it to these naval games, they said. Mm-hmm. They actually did it for the Spartans and the Greeks and the Persians, and that was their sort of their dream, which is why they went back to that. And I think shied away from it. But in the interview, he said, we are going to go back to that. We've got a book. We love the book. He and the guy who did all the other rule books did it, and they love it. And it's just a matter of time. You'll see that eventually. But right now, they're focusing on what's really brought success to the company.
I'm nervous for them on their skirmish, James, just because that market is so flooded. But at the same time, it's all about the miniatures. And if their miniatures look as amazing as their ships do, then it won't even really matter what their rules are. People will buy the miniatures for other games. You know what I mean?
My thought,
Kind of like
it
Mantic's
was
doing with their stuff.
right. My thought was I had a huge issue with it back when I was waiting for Firestorm Armada and we had Uncharted Seas and that's all we had, and all of a sudden all of this 50 millimeter skirmish stuff was coming out, and I was like, what are you doing? But if you think about it, if they've got 3, 4, or 5 games that I love, and they've got, that skirmish game, then more power to them.
Mm-hmm. As long as it doesn't become a albatross, But I think as long as the miniatures are awesome, it'll make enough money to not matter, and then it'll just be be gravy for any rule sales.
Yeah. So he talked about how they took the Death or Glory rules and they looked at it and they went, you know what, you could extend this over several different genres, and one that makes a lot of sense was naval combat, which is why they brought it into Uncharted Seas, and then they brought it into Firestorm Armada, and with Dystopian Wars they've actually pushed it as far as they think it can go to bring air, sea, and land all together in one system. And they think they've done it well, but, and this was the big announcement that he made on our interview, was they've come up with a whole new set of rules for ground combat that's going to be applied to Dystopian Wars in particular, and it's going to be free. It's not going to be something that you have to run out and buy, and it's not a this takes the place of pages 8 through 27 of the rule book or anything like that. It's Dystopian Wars is Dystopian Wars, but if you want to play just ground and air, you can use these rules instead, which actually support a much larger battle because it's more specific focus on unit to unit rather than model to model.
Right. It's more
and
of
the exciting thing, I think, for Russ and I was where this started.
Yeah.
Where did it start?
Well, it started with this is from the new Firestorm Armada stuff, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and he was kind of vague on this, but he talked about this idea that there's a smaller scale ground combat Firestorm.
No, that was later on in the interview.
Was it later? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, no. I know what you're talking about.
This was about the smaller scale.
That's right. There's where there's the same ships, but now they're tinier. So that means there was designed for this, even playing around with this idea of massive fleet actions, where in Firestorm now you might have 30 or 40 models on the table in a big game. Now he's talking like hundreds of models.
Right. And they skip because it's all CAD.
Right.
They were able to just crank out smaller models. So the battleships are now the size of cruisers, the cruisers are the size of frigates, and the frigates, they actually had to make little stands like the Dystopian Wars fighter stands. Right. And it's like a unit of frigates instead of.
My favorite part was, though,
frigates.
I asked him, I was like, well, can you, I kind of goofed with him and said, well, you're going to, whole new rules, so I got to buy new Firestorm models, thinking it's still going to be awesome. And he said, well, you don't have to. I mean, if you really want to collect 100 of the big ones, the rules will work.
Exactly,
so if you wanted to have like a Firestorm Armada mega battle and get all your friends together and have a massive game with these huge numbers of models together at that scale, you can play with these new rules, or you can get the smaller models and play, a more, the same sort of thing on a more reasonable table surface. So it sounds like a really fun, they're going these interesting directions up and down with scale, where you can have these really fun large battles, which we've seen other companies fiddle around with, like with GW's, Armageddon? Apocalypse.
Oh, yeah.
Things like that, sort of similar ideas, but I think they're doing it Spartan still has this idea for speed of play and simplicity of play that a lot of other companies don't necessarily get to their level on. And I really like that about Spartan. I know there's a lot of abstractions in there that maybe certain hardcore war gamers are like, oh, this is too abstract, but I kind of like that the games play fast and are a little lighter, Not Beer and Pretzels light, but they're lighter,
And to give you an example of the scale these games can be played at, Neil was actually talking about a playtesting game that he had just done before he did the interview, where he was running 140 Britannian tanks in one battle, including 60 land ships, a bunch of artillery, and 15 airships.
Yep.
Holy cow.
He said he lost that game because he stinks at his own games, but that's a lot of models in one game.
That is all good. I think there are worlds of gamers out there going, yes, please, more of that,
Absolutely,
sir.
Yep.
Where do I write the check?
Yep. And it's interesting. He said it is coming out for Firestorm Armada, but they're not. I think a bunch of stuff is coming out for a bunch of different things, and he's very excited about it. But he's also very respectful of their retail partners and their distribution chain. And he knows that he can't just keep cranking stuff out and throwing boxes at the stores and expecting them to just open wide their shelves.
Oh, it's funny. Yeah. I heard this argument again at the Games Store the other night, and I think we've talked about this in the show before, but I just want to mention, I think it bears repeating. So there was a game of Dystopian Wars going on, and a couple of younger folks were there watching the game, and some of our friends were playing with them, and they're like, and they're looking at it, and they go, why do they do this? Why don't they just release it all at once? Why do they make me wait for the ground units? And why do they release a book with things that aren't even out yet? They should just dump them all out now. And there's a bunch of reasons why they can't do this in terms of manufacturing time and all that. But let's say they waited, as Rafe thinks they sometimes do, and have huge piles of these things in pallets in their room, and wait till everything's done before they ship anything. Every single thing in the book is done, and there's hundreds of units. As a retail store,
I don't think that.
Well, no, you've said that they can send it to us early, right? Like it's sitting there waiting for.
Yeah.
So, but they don't really. Cause the problem is when a retail store, orders this stuff to sit on their shelves to sell, they have to write a check to the distributor for the stuff they're ordering. So if Dystopian Wars comes out, right, and there are 4 starter boxes for me to buy, and I want to have 4 deep of each, I got to write a check for, 16 starter boxes at that's my margin, right, for that cost for those boxes. And I have to have a check big enough in my bank account to cover it. Now, once they sell, I can use a portion of those profits to order more, to replace the stock, and to order new Dystopian War stuff. But if I have to order an entire line of hundreds of products right out of the gate, or I look like to my players, I haven't ordered everything. It's just too much to order. It's an overwhelming amount. I can't carry it all at once. And if every gaming company did that every month, you know what I mean? So gaming companies would be very conscientious of how much new releases the channel can support, right?
Exactly.
That's a very important thing. That's why it's metered out, even though sometimes the designs are done. That's through the whole manufacturing process that has to happen, right? They can't, but it needs to be spread out, and that's why these companies don't. They design it all to get you excited and have the rule book be complete, but they can't just dump it all on the retailers and into the channel like that. It would flood everything.
Right, and that's why he's saying he doesn't know how they're going to deal with the tiny Firestorm Armada yet.
Right.
But he did say it's probably going to even find its way down to Uncharted Seas eventually as well. So that would be cool also. And as Russ said, you didn't have to go buy a bunch of small models. He said the rules will be scalable so you can use your normal size models as well. It'll just take a lot more of them.
Right.
And then we asked just really quickly what we thought. Like, obviously they learned from one project to the next because, like you said, Firestorm are much smoother and more polished than Uncharted Seas, and Dystopian Wars is just leaps and bounds ahead of Firestorm Armada as far as how scheduled and they were. He said that you'll learn planning and like basically when they released Uncharted Seas, they didn't know what they had coming, and so they had to start planning and putting all these things together, getting all their ducks in a row.
Okay.
And so now what they're doing is they plan ahead a lot more. Right. They've got like a year in advance, everything's all laid out so that they've got an actual plan they're moving to rather than, and then we'll release this and see what happens.
Right.
Which I think we actually saw that
in Uncharted Seas. We saw that
in Uncharted Seas in those early first releases after the first wave. It was like, wow, that's kind of cool, but there's no rules for it, or and now they've got all of these things. Now we have the rules for every model that's going to come out in Dystopian Wars for the next 6 months.
Right.
So and he knows and says that we will be amazed when we know what's coming out with Dystopian Wars for the next 12 months. And he said by the end of 2011, it's going to be one of the most amazing games you can imagine because of all the stuff that's going to be coming out in the second half of the year, which is very exciting, especially for everybody who's waiting for Antarctica.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, and the interesting thing is with the planning, actually, is that his wife is now becoming more involved because she's actually a global corporate logistics specialist. Right. So she's actually working with the company now, and that's the one thing that Neil doesn't enjoy doing. So now he's spending more time with the games,
right?
Which was interesting.
Behind every good man is a great woman.
Yeah, indeed,
that's true.
And we've already touched on his next point, which was Dystopian Wars was such a big secret, and obviously it was a secret because if they had released, "Hey, we're going to have a new big game in 6 months," everybody would stop buying Uncharted Seas and Firestorm Armada in the anticipation that the next big thing was going to be even cooler.
That's the
they're advancing Firestorm Armada and Uncharted Seas, and they're developing, and they've got all these new things coming out. They have Firestorm Invasion, which he talked about a little bit later, in development, and he didn't want any of those things to be derailed by rampant speculation about this new game and everybody just stopping what they're doing and waiting for that next one.
Right.
Which I found interesting again, and that goes back to the whole developing this concept of planning and having everything laid out ahead of you as you're going forward. So anybody
What's next?
you go next.
I don't know where I am.
Yeah,
I've been so
you guys
I've just been
aren't
talking.
following along.
No, I've been talking to you. Just this is
you're just chatting?
This is a
You're
discussion
chatting?
format.
Oh, okay.
This is one of those discussions.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm pretending we're at Dunks.
Right.
Oh, okay.
It's 11
Well, in that
o'clock
case,
at night.
Then let me remind you that Russ actually wanted to talk a little bit about the background that went into the Dystopian Wars books and the graphic art work that went in so much more than the other books, and wanted to know where those things came from.
Yes.
And what Neil actually said was there's actually way more art than they've shown you so far, and we've actually seen a few of the pieces ourselves. Sort of in them. And so he's very excited. They brought on Sally, who's actually, I loved this, an organic painter,
Right.
as opposed to an electronic painter.
Yeah, I'm
she's-
it's curious what that actually. I'm just not familiar with the art world to know what that really means.
No, I don't think it's art world.
Or does it mean she
terminology.
mostly
I think
paints
it's
plants?
Computer terminology. I think it means that she paints with paint rather than on.
Oh! I thought maybe it meant that you do still lifes a lot, like plants.
No, I think because
I don't
what he
know. I
said
don't
was
know.
she actually paints with. She's an organic painter. She actually paints with paint. is what he said.
As opposed to a digital painter, a digital artist.
Exactly. Okay. So, and she's churning out these portraits of all these important characters, like Senator Glon.
That's the third plug for those listening at home.
Little
drink.
and so it's crazy that she's got all these out there still that they couldn't fit in the book. So there's still a whole bunch more that's actually going to be added onto the website. You're going to have all kinds of. The world is just going to keep developing, and they'll probably collate it into another book.
Didn't he mention? We talked about. I think we asked about the new decks, right?
That comes in a little bit later.
Well,
too.
I'm going to jump ahead because it's a conversation.
Okay, you go ahead and jump ahead because it's a conversation.
Enjoy a Dunkin' Donuts donut while I pontificate.
Okay. I'm going to drink my ice coffee.
Allow me to illuminate while I elucidate. So I think, didn't he say that they were going to do decks of cards, but in addition to being race-specific, they're actually going to be character-specific within each of the factions, right? So
there's going to be a deck of cards that they sell that are characters.
Oh, characters,
and you can add them to your deck.
Oh, okay. So you add them, so you seed your deck with these characters.
Yeah.
So some of this artwork then might appear on those cards.
Exactly.
So Senator Gallant, might be somebody that if you play him, you can diplomatically stall an action or something. Who knows what it does, right?
Or you can sink a southern ship, whatever.
Right, or whatever. So so that kind of thing. So it'd be kind of cool. That'd be a neat.
There's all kinds of options. I think that they're putting into the game as they
so there's
go
the deck
forward.
building element. That means in addition to your factions deck, you can also build your deck with little extra cards and stuff. That's really
right.
Cool.
Yeah.
So the characters, are we allowed to talk about Senator Gallant and things?
I don't see why not.
Okay.
Well, no,
It's on the website. They linked it. I mentioned it I kind of hinted at it because I wanted. Here's the deal. Okay, so they have a bunch of characters they want to paint up portraits for, and they have a bunch of ideas. And what Neil decided was he really enjoyed the interview. He really enjoyed spending some time with us, and he decided that if he wanted to have our pictures become portraits of some of these characters,
which is awesome.
Freaking awesome.
Unbelievable.
That's just one more thing on the bucket list.
Humbled by that.
I'm in a game. I know, right? It's crazy.
Exactly. It's one more thing I can check off my bucket list.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It's one more thing I can do because it's
so that's what I wanted to know. So this isn't just there's going to be a picture somewhere. These are actual characters?
Well, no, they don't. Well, I don't know how far it goes. Right now, there's a picture of me on the website with some fluff in front of it talking about I'm a senator from the North that hates the fact that the South won the Civil War, so I'm secretly working against the FSA government. And my family is wealthy, and I'm using my family wealth to slowly build a private army.
Oh, cool.
Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, what that means is that I have this awesome personalized reason and justification and fluff behind my FSA army. Okay. And so that's so basically I knew they were coming up with some fluff. And so almost everybody who works at Spartan is on their forums, including the guy who does all of their fluff writing. And so on one thread that he had come on a couple times, I was like, oh, by the way, might there be a senator or might there be a politician? Because all I knew at that point was that I was called the politician, the FSA politician. So I said, is there any way that politician may be from the north and working against the south? And then Neil jumped onto the thread and was like, Craig, are you talking about this guy? And included a link. And then it was like,
drink.
And then the link, exactly. And then the link actually, now when you go there, it actually says, and I don't know if there's any other way to get there right now except the link because it's kind of a preview. But
cool.
The fluff is all about how, what I just said, I'm a senator that's against the actual government.
That's cool. So I like that you somehow you managed to, or you did it, or they had planned this anyway and you just got in, was the idea that there's fluff reasons for infighting within the factions.
Right, that's what I was thinking.
Which is always nice because that means now there's a reason for Craig's FSA to be going after someone else's FSA, and I'm sure there will be infighting even amongst the Empire of Japan and all those other things, so it'll be cool.
Yeah. Oh, there already is, yeah.
Yeah, right.
And remember, there's like a splinter faction.
Right. Yeah. They've already got it lit up, which is awesome. It just gives you more fluff, and it's just fun to have those little fluff reasons for all kinds of crazy things to happen.
And so Rafe's painting was finished today.
Mm-hmm.
Looks really good.
I love it.
Yeah, it's great.
And it's awesome. And Russ's is still in preliminary sketch mode, but he's a scientist, which is friggin' cool as hell.
Hilarious.
And he's got I would say, Russ, you're the most steampunk looking.
I have the goggles. I have the little.
You've got all those monocles, and you've got.
Well,
those
Rafe's got everybody. We've all got facial hair we don't normally wear, or more than we normally wear.
Yes.
And then, Rafe looks. Well, Rafe's
I've got
the
more hair,
spyglass.
period, than I normally.
Rafe's got the spyglass, but I've got the crazy steampunk scientific goggly things going on, which is just awesome. Yeah, good stuff. So I can't wait to see mine all done up, but it's definitely.
I like
cool
how mine.
to be in a game.
I've got my hand like Napoleon inside my tunic.
Yeah.
And that's something I totally would do.
You totally would.
You do it now, don't you?
I was going to say, and I expect you to do it much more often now.
Yeah. It's usually
I need a tunic.
It's usually a little more Al Bundy than Napoleon, but I think it was kind of
in
nice.
his pants.
That's what I'm saying. Anyway, moving along.
Okay, moving along.
You pay your $1, you get those kind of jokes, people. That's all I'm saying.
Exactly. We want to give you your money's worth,
right? Or whatever. At least 99 cents worth.
Right? Yeah, guys.
We're stealing that last penny.
Russ gets the penny on his own.
That's right.
Anyway, and so to go back, what I was saying, Neil says like the Dystopian Wars. He's really proud of it because it's the most Neil. Yeah, it has the most Neil in it. He was more focused on it than the other game.
Yep.
Firestorm Armada. He was doing a lot of the business stuff, which he doesn't like, and that his wife is now picking up, and other office people. So he was really excited that Dystopian Wars was doing well because he had put so much of himself into it. And I think all of our listeners know that locally for us, Dystopian Wars is really, really kind of lit a fire in the local group, or at least seems to have. Hopefully it'll stick around for a little while. And we wanted to know, is that like what he's seeing around the world? Is Dystopian Wars a big deal? And he said, really, it's amazing. They're very, very humbled by everything that's happened. Firestorm Armada did better than Uncharted Seas, and Dystopian Wars is going on the same track. And he just said that the new stuff coming out is going to be so amazing that it's going to blow the stuff right now that we have away.
Wow.
And really just super excited. He was talking about the medium flyers that are now on the website you can look at. He loves the Blazing Sun, was his favorite.
I like it too. I think it's cool.
And he talked about what I just said, like the game is planned now 12 months in advance. They know everything that's coming up, and you cannot wait until 2011 to see what's coming.
I can't wait.
And he said, quote, Dystopian Wars is going to take off. At which point Russ said, "Look, it has it already."
Right, well, these are.
And
that's what I'm
he
here
said
for.
the whole game is going to grow and evolve, and we haven't seen anything yet. As far as Firestorm Armada, but he said he was very good about not just focusing on Dystopian Wars through the whole thing. He wanted us to know that all the games are being supported. Firestorm Armada is getting the Alliance books that are coming out this half of the year, I think. 14 new ships with 14 new races that I think work in alliances. That's why they're called alliances.
Cool. Yep, right.
They're finally getting their race decks of cards instead of the generic one, which is something they've been promising since the game came out. So that's
Firestorm
awesome.
needs
And
that.
then
That'll be nice.
the deck of cards that Russ was talking about that has the characters in it with scientists and officers and things that can actually adjust your fleet. And then Uncharted Seas is getting a whole new supplement that's actually going to add a whole bunch of new models and concepts to that game.
Now, where does that make you guys feel? Does that make you want to run back and play Uncharted Seas, or are you totally
I think if I was reading the right book, I would want to play Uncharted Seas. Right now, I really want to play Firestorm Armada because I'm still listening to, like I said, the Miles Forkosigan series, which is space.
The games don't feel preclusionary to me. They feel inclusionary. Like, I don't mind because the rules are so close. I don't think my brain breaks when I switch between them.
But they're different enough. You feel like you're playing different games,
right? And it reminds me very much of when I would switch from 40K to Warhammer Fantasy.
Sure.
It was kind of like a nice change. It was different experience, and yet the core mechanics were close enough where it wasn't like, now how does toughness work again? It was all the same. So I like it, I get excited. Like I have one of the airships for Uncharted Seas on hold at Myriad. I can't wait to pick it up and get that painted. I have I got that whole new fleet, Firestorm, that calls to me from my bag from Gen Con. Still haven't got to because I got distracted.
Yeah.
But it's not like I'm like, oh, I'll never play that again. I know it's coming back to the table. It's just a matter of when, So for me, it's all cool. And I think the more people get into dystopian wars, I think the more it'll help those other games get into other players' minds too. Because if they like dystopian wars, they might be more likely to try Firestorm when they feel like they need some sci-fi.
Right. And and the key is like Russ said, when we used to just play 40K and fantasy. You'd play 40K and then you'd want a different game and want a fantasy game, so you'd play fantasy. And right now what happens is, we want a sci-fi game, we're going to play X. We want a fantasy game, we're going to play Y. We want a steampunk game, we're going to play Z. And what Spartan Games, I think, is almost positioning themselves as is sort of like that go-to company where, like Russ said, your brain's not going to break going totally different game to game to game, but you're going to be able to. I refuse to use the scratch analogy.
Right. I do too.
But it's so
I'm there with you.
It works. It's short. It's mental shorthand. It's lazy, and I am not lazy. That's a lie. I totally am lazy. But you can go from game to game to game where they're all similar enough that you can remember the basic rules and just brush up really quickly on the differences, but it's satisfying a different gaming urge with each different game that you go to.
Right.
So for a while we'll be playing Dystopian Wars, for instance, hopefully through the entire XCAM.
Yes.
And then if all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, I'm in the mood for fantasy, Uncharted Seas, or whatever.
Right.
But speaking of Firestorm Armada, the last thing that we talked with Neil about was the big thing that everybody was talking about that we thought was the next big thing from Spartan Games, which was Firestorm Invasion. Now remember, Firestorm Invasion was seen by our friends Shifty and Matt at Gen Con. Shifty was excited and Matt was like, metza on the game. From what they saw. So I was excited about it. I thought it might be the next big epic, they've already replaced, as far as I'm concerned, Man of War and
BFG,
and Battlefleet Gothic. 5, and so I think it's only a matter of time before they come up. Right. But that's not the order I was going in. But yeah.
And Warhammer Historical Ancients.
Okay, thank you. And so Firestorm Invasion I thought was going to be this next thing, and what Neil told us was no, it's going to be something bigger. So far, right now, there are 6 fully realized races in Firestorm Armada. What are they, Russ?
Oh, you bastard. Okay. Aquin Prime.
Yeah. That would be your fleet. Good job, you.
No, I got the other one, too. The ones that look like the Star Trek dudes.
That's not their name.
Begins with a D, right? You don't remember either. So you don't remember either. Aha!
The Dindrenzi.
Dindrenzi, that's the one.
Those are the ones I have.
There's ones that begin with an R that are the spider people that don't have spider ships.
Relthosa.
Yep. And then there's... Wow. I guess I got to read my Firestorm book again.
Magpie.
I forget. Earth. Oh, yeah. What are they called? Earth?
Terrans.
There you go, Terrans. I can't remember. I don't know the rest of them.
the Ceruleans.
Yes, the Ceruleans. Yep.
And
Who
the
else?
Directorate.
There you go. Oh, the Directorate was
Games
the one I
just
was
a bunch
thinking
of
of.
cigars.
The
in
Directorate are the
space.
ones you got.
I just got those. Yeah.
It's just cigars in space.
So,
Actually, they don't
so
look like that at
Firestorm
all.
Invasion. So, Firestorm Invasion, to the best of my knowledge, is actually I know for a fact that I'm right. Is the first Spartan game that's actually coming out with more than 4 opening factions because it's
Right.
going to release supporting all 6 of the current Firestorm Armada factions.
Right.
So it's going to have all 6 of those. 168 models detailed in the rule book for the game.
Nice.
Right out of the book. Now, those aren't, again, like we said, they're not all going to be released at the same time at the beginning.
Right.
Much
Correct.
like the Dystopian Wars. Yes, Rafe.
As much as I'm enjoying the story, I think that Dunkin' Donuts is going to kick us out.
No, they're not.
Oh, they're kind of looking at us from behind the counter.
No, they're
like,
looking.
cool.
They're looking
We're
at you
almost
funny
we're
because
coming to the end. But this is the best part of the interview. The dogs are coming though. They're releasing the hounds.
Yeah, you heard the dogs.
So,
That's awesome.
so
I
we do
wish
have to wrap it up.
somebody
But
would take care of the dog.
But here's the thing about this. Okay, so what made me really excited about this game the most was
Yeah.
when Neil started talking about this game at the strategic level.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, so this is a game where your models are so small and the board is so large in terms of what you're commanding that you're thinking about supply lines and where the troops are landing and where the reinforcements are coming from, and you're at a very, very macro level. And
Right.
that's something you don't really get in miniature war games a lot. That's stuff you get in the old chit and hex games.
Yeah, I was going to say
Right.
like board games.
And so that's really fascinating to me, and I can't wait to see how they handle this from a rules approach as well as from a models approach. But we've seen already what really amazed me, I think, a lot about Dystopian Wars was these little tiny flyers. Right?
Yeah.
Really cool looking, essentially board game bits.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. They could be, those could be, if you can do that level, there could be anything. Those could be infantry models. Those could be little tiny groups of tanks. Those could be fuel trucks. I mean, they could do all kinds of stuff with that. And
Ooh,
then
that
you
sounds
have,
fun.
You'd have a crazy cool, amazing, massively huge board game experience on a miniature tabletop.
Right.
Which is really exciting. It's something that's not been really done by anyone. So they're in another realm that could be really cool if they pull it off right. And from everything I heard from Neil talking about it, I think he's the kind of guy that can actually make this work. So
that does sound exciting.
When's
that supposed to
that was when I declared my unconditional man crush on him at that point.
Yes,
in the
you
interview.
did.
Yeah.
Well, and just because I don't want to shortchange the folks that wanted to get the actual information that he gave, because what he's talking
Got to
about.
get 99 cents worth out of this, baby.
Yeah, exactly. I want them to get that extra penny actually
Right,
that you're stealing from them.
I am.
the dwarf's penny.
Exactly. It's not just that you're what Russ said, you're not just commanding large groups of troops, you're also doing the logistics and where are they landing in the first wave and the second wave, and it's not we have to take that bridge with this giant army. It's actually with this huge force we have to take an entire planet.
Right.
And the key thing that actually I meant to say before I started babbling, because I looked at the wrong point in the notes, was everybody who saw the models at Gen Con and thought, meh, that's what Neil said. Neil said, yeah, the models at Gen Con, they were nice, but compared to the final models that they've come up with now, they were crude.
Yeah,
is
I
what
know.
he said.
So I think,
So
don't judge the book by that particular cover. That was totally prototype stuff. So
right, and you can find all that stuff online. So if you've looked at that stuff already and you're like, it's not for me, the quality's not there. Those were prototypes, and those are several generations old now.
I think you got to look at Dystopian Wars and multiply it times 2.
Yeah,
So I think at the rate they're progressing, I think that's where they're going to be middle of next year.
Oh.
yeah.
Why not
He said it
times
was
10?
all about managing assets, and it's not
That-
just going to be.
I've always liked that aspect of the
Right.
game.
Yeah, it's not going to be just like one tank unit versus another tank unit. It's actually going to be, how do I manage the tank units, and what do I do with that second wave
That's
of
gonna
tank
suck
units,
in-
and where do the
see-
drop ships come in?
That's going to suck in more. It's going to be another hit because it's going to bring in your board game crew, your grognards who are the real hardcore historical guys. Are going to love that, as well as folks like us who are really into the visuals. But are like, we've never had this kind of experience before. You're going to bring all those folks together, just like Dystopian Wars is doing with the historical guys in our group again.
Yeah,
They're back.
and
so
the
it's
cool
really
thing
cool.
is, he said it's totally going to support dual games with Firestorm Armada games happening in orbit, and the Firestorm Invasion game playing out simultaneously, where you're trying to get your troop transports to the planet, and as they reach the planet, your guys are coming down in their waves, and it's a very complicated concept. It's all about command and control, so it's not finished yet. They're still working on it. But I think it's going to be awesome.
So we should probably sum up now before Mr. Burns releases the hounds.
Yeah. Oh, we're done.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
That's why I knew that Dunkin' Donuts wasn't going to kick us out before we were ready.
Is Rafe snoring, or is he still with us?
I'm still here.
Good. All right. Great.
I'm doing that part where I'm starting to think about my drive home, which I don't have. I'm at this fictitious Dunks after a game night, and I'm like, I hope I don't fall asleep. But the good news is I can just fall right into my
bed. Right.
Exactly.
See,
you
it's
could fall
virtual
asleep
Dunks.
right where you are and probably not hurt yourself too
it's
bad.
Virtual Dunks.
Right.
But if you're listening in the car,
the microphone being padded,
if you're listening in the car right now, don't fall asleep.
No.
Get home
don't
safely,
do it.
and then have some good gaming.
Absolutely.
Right.
And
We'll
thank
see
you for sporting the D6 generation.
Right.
Do we have any witty sign off at the end of these yet?
Yeah, isn't our sign off what you know helps you grow?
No, that's G.I. Joe. That's half the battle, though. Supporting the show helps it grow.
Have some snow.
No, and I usually stick a...
Those are perfect.
Okay, that's quite witty.
All right, peace out.
Now we're out.
Thanks for purchasing a D6G Lost Chapter. Supporting the show helps it
grow. Give you something? Oh, I'll give you something. Give them something to talk about. A little something to figure out. Let's give them something to talk about. Talk about games. Ooh.
Wow. See, I normally could jump in and help you out there. That song, you were on your own.
That was awesome.
Well, let's give them something to talk about.
We don't need to know the way home.
That's hilarious.
All we want is what we heard. The Thunderdome.
The Umbrella song.